other people that are on Medicaid. And so I'd seen one person, and it was somebody that we had actually employed out of homelessness that actually was able to get a bed for 3 weeks, and that was it. So that's why it's really hard. The drugs that they've used are so brain damaging, and it started with spice. Spice just fried the brains. And so some of them, there's no help they can get. So you work with them. We need to have facilities that they can go to where you just take care of them, an assisted living or like the former, I know they weren't good, but the mental hospitals that they were in, at least they could go there and be cared for and off the street. So that's just what I've seen with the people. 70 women a night staying with us, and some of them haven't left in 6 years. They just can't. So.
Okay, thank you. Listening to the responses there, I heard a lot of common sense and folks who have been doing a lot of work and thinking about these topics. And thank you for that. But let's talk about housing in a little bit more nuanced way. It sounds like there was near consensus that housing first is not the answer from the panelists. Two of the four of you spoke to that explicitly, and I think the other two kind of hinted at maybe that's not really necessarily the right way to go forward. The Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness, which is our continuum of care, is the overarching body that directs much of the work to address homelessness in the community, has a website. On the website, on the front page, it says, "Housing is the solution to homelessness." Mr. Gerker, since you went last time, do you think housing is the solution to homelessness?
I mean, it's got to be part of the answer, right? I mean, if you don't have somewhere to go, then I guess you're going to continue to be homeless. But it's not the driving factor, I would argue, because what we've seen here in Anchorage is we've seen a relatively stable rental market. We've seen that, and we've seen that's, if that were the driving factor, that we would have a higher rate, as kind of correlated to that. I think the real issue here, and I think the real barrier here, is severe mental health issues and drug addictions. So housing has to be a part of the solution, right? We have to have more housing. We do see that we have a housing shortage here, but it's not the driving factor, right? Like it's not. We have, I think, like a 4.6 or something % vacancy factor here in the city. So it's not that we don't see a ton of people out on the streets because there's just simply no housing whatsoever. We see a ton of people out on the streets because they're struggling from addiction and that sort of thing. So no, I don't think that is the exclusive reason. I do think it is part of the solution, but not the end all, be all necessarily.
Thank you. Mr. Coyne?
Yeah, I can go. I agree. I echo the housing is not the main driving factor, that the market's been fairly stable and we still have increasing homelessness. I'd go back to some remarks on mental institutions as they were back in the 70s. The pendulum has swung far. I mean, the conditions that were happening in the 70s were not ideal and not good, and we immediately saw the pendulum is now swung to the other side. We are fully allowing patient autonomy even when patients may not be fully conscious of the decisions that they're making. And it's a balance of honoring people's liberty and autonomy. I would say going back to data again is where I go, and looking back at the 70s, 50s, 60s, 70s, transitioning to the 80s and 90s, you see when you graph it, the rate of institutionalism in the mental hospitals and the incarceration was incredibly low. And as you see those institutions closed, it completely inverses, and the populations remain the same. It's just that now the majority of them are incarcerated in prisons, and we have a very low amount of institutionalized people at psychiatric facilities. So I know it's not addressing housing specifically, but it is where we are now housing many of these people and not attributing enough resources to those populations that are incarcerated.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I spent 2 years as homeless coordinator for the municipality, and at that time we did a program called Next Step Initiative, and I'm going to tell an anecdotal story about Next Step that really was eye-opening for me. We had a client who was in CWS at the time, which is our cold weather shelter over at 56th Avenue. And he had been kicked out for smoking fentanyl in the bathroom. And not only that, once he got caught, he lit up one more time and blew fentanyl smoke into a staff member's face. So not only are you putting that client at risk, you're putting other clients at risk, you're putting our staff at risk. So he was immediately kicked out of the shelter to the streets and took up camp at Elderberry Park. A week later, Elderberry Park was abated directly into housing. This client specifically got put on a case management and did not last long enough in housing to even be case managed. So there are breaks in the system. Housing first does not mean housing only. I think the answer to homelessness or the solution to homelessness is healing, whether that's accountability, finding purpose, getting sober, finding faith. Those things add to the healing, which add to, getting out of homelessness. But I think there's breaks in the system with the housing first model. Not to say it does not work in any circumstance. I have seen people who were given a chance, who were ready to take that next step, who were given an apartment, actively engaged in case management, are now paying their own rent at Golden Lion with income that they solely earn. And so there are success stories, but when you envelop an entire population to say this is the model we are taking, you will see far greater fallout of that system than someone who is walking alongside of someone saying, let's get you sober first, let's get you cleaned up, tell me what you need, so that in a month from now, I can get you into a housing facility where I'm checking on you once a week and you're ready to take the next step in your life change. So I think that's the method. Housing first works in some cases, but I would not say that it is the greatest system ever made.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I agree with Alexis on that. I just think that the whole term housing first just is misleading for everybody. They need to be sheltered, yes. We need shelters, but not the kind of shelters we see here in Anchorage. We need shelters where the whole person is cared for. We have a woman in our shelter, she's been there 6 or 7 years, and very much mentally unstable. I've seen her record. They've sent her to the prison, to their mental health care. They put her back to API. They kicked her out. And so she just kind of hung out in the shelter. And with interacting with her, we have a life skills class that is just basically heart issues. And so I just invited her and another gal that had been there many years and not very social up into the class. They, in the last 3 months in this class, have begun to interact with people, and they're starting to think. They tell me about their children now. I think all these years, they would never talk about their children. They never talk about their past. So what I've seen is when they're in a loving environment where people are talking to them, caring for them, there's somebody important. They're not just, a person on a cot. They actually are expected to interact. They do chores. And so what we have done is created, and most of these missions on here are that way. You create an environment where they feel like they have value, because they do. They're human beings, and they have value. And some of them it's a much longer process. A woman coming out of trafficking, she has been so broken down that you put her in a housing first thing all by herself. Next thing you know, some guy's knocking on the door, shooting her up with drugs, raping her. And it goes on and on and on. We have women constantly come back to the shelter that have gone into a housing. They get their voucher or they get their room, and then the guys are using them. They're coming in, or security guards are coming in their rooms and using them, and then they come back. One of them got addicted to heroin because they come in there and shoot her up, rape her, and they come. So I have story after story after story of where that's happened. So it's not the answer, but a community of care, which is why I really advocate for a large, it's not just a shelter, a large facility that becomes a center that cares for them. They know where to go. When they become homeless, they can go, before they're even homeless, they can go down there and start getting the help they need. We don't have anything like that. People don't know where to go for care because it's scattered all over our city. So I think we've been really misled by the coalition on this housing first thing.
Thank you. And the audience thanks you all too. Ms. Johnson told the story of a person that had to be kicked out of the shelter in the program. And that must be a very difficult decision to make someone leave someplace that's safe and go someplace that's not safe. But she laid out why it had to be made. It wasn't, the person wasn't safe for themselves in the facility, and they weren't safe for the other people in the facility. Mr. McCormick, you work in healthcare and you talk about autonomy. What do you think is the community's responsibility, if any, to folks like that? Folks that may have a mental illness, folks that may have a substance abuse problem, that may not have capacity for decision making, as we might say in healthcare, who are making choices that are unsafe for themselves and others. And we have to put them out of the facilities we have. What's the responsibility of the community for that person, if any? And then if there's a difference, what should the community do or offer that person that's different than what's our responsibility?
Yeah, well, right now, like I talked about, our laws give these people their full autonomy, which I agree with. I agree with, you know, people expressing their absolute highest amount of liberty and personal rights. But then that comes also back to if they do, I support their choice not to engage in society if that's what they so choose. But that's also has a flip side of then they cannot live off of the society that they choose not to participate in. And that comes to our parks, and our parks being a safe place because they are a public space. They're for everyone. And when people set up camps, they are taking over that space and making it not public. They are very realistically making it their own space that we're paying for, and they're making it unsafe for others. So we as a community need to respect their rights, but also maintain our rights as the public to our public spaces.
Thank you. Mr. Gerber? Feel free to respond or the same question.
Yeah, no, look, I think I don't think that's wrong. I think that as a city, we've got to balance compassion with public safety, right? And for so many people, all they're seeing is the public safety side of it, because they're seeing the parks being taken over, they're finding the needles on this school playground and stuff like that. They're seeing the fires, and like this next summer is going to be really dicey, guys, because we had a really dry winter, and there's a very high risk of fire. And we saw it on the documentary where somebody left the gas running and it started a fire. We've seen it; it's a common thing. And so the public has a right to demand that we do better. The public has a right to demand that we are enforcing our laws, that we're securing these public spaces and making them safe for public enjoyment. Now, what we can't lose sight of in this is that we are dealing with human beings, and they are in tragic situations, right? The circumstances that have led them to the streets are heartbreaking. And so we have to be able to balance the compassion with public safety. There has to be accountability for the folks out there, and we just simply haven't done a very good job of that as management, definitely not at the city level. And so you look at organizations like yours that is doing a phenomenal job, and I've seen it firsthand, and it's incredible. We need to do more of that. We need to look at what's working and do more of that instead of doing something that's not been working and we've obviously not working and continuing to do it because this is what we kind of think we should do. So we've really got to do a lot better of a job. I think that the public has been incredibly patient with this city for a number of years, and I think the patience is running out. And so we have an obligation. We have got to act on this. We've got to get this cleaned up, not only for the public, but also for the people in these circumstances, because it's dangerous out there, and they are dying on the streets. And we simply cannot afford to wait any longer and make them suffer out another winter out on the streets.
Thank you. Ms. Lori, I think you're uniquely in a position on the panel of having had to make that tough call in the past. But what do you think about what your other panelists have said, or what's that decision like? How do you think about it?
So we've had to deal with this a lot. I mean, the women can get violent in there, especially depending on the drug they're on. They've come out of, like I said, trafficking or prostitution, any of those things. And they're so emotionally strung out. And so we've had staff they've had a couple staff members get concussions. One day we had 6 of the other ladies in the shelter hold a lady down. The cops took almost an hour to get there. So it is a problem. And when we kick somebody out is because they are violent. But what we have done is we have a courtyard outside. And so we're able to put them separate from everybody else. They go out to the courtyard. And if they can't behave there, then they'll have to go, but we do let them hang out by the building because it's the only safe place for them. In a larger facility, and I've seen this at, I think it was the one in San Antonio I went to. When somebody first comes there to check in, they have an area that is basically just emergency shelter. That's where they start, and they process them there. And then they get into the different various levels of, depending on the program they're in. But if they become a problem, they go back out to the emergency shelter, which most of it is just, and it's San Antonio, so it's warm, but is a shelter, they get a cot and a sleeping bag. And so they have different levels that they let them into as they discipline them. So you still keep them safe, because if they're out, they're a hazard to the public. Many of them, I think with Alexis deaths is exactly what needs to be done. You can't have somebody that is that disrespectful. But there needs to be some place for them to go besides just out in the street, because they will hurt somebody else, and we've seen that happen. So I just am so for, because I've gone to several of these, and I'm so for a big facility. We were looking at Northway Mall at one point, and I had a beautiful plan drawn out, and then they decided to put O'Reilly's Auto Parts there. But there, $190 million was put into homelessness since 2020 in Anchorage. Do you have any idea what kind of a facility we would have? We'd have a beautiful facility, and this problem would not be where it is today. So, that's it.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson.
I'm gonna give a hot take. I told myself I was gonna tell the truth today, so I'm going to. I don't believe that people want to be outside. I think there's a brokenness in people that forces them outside, but I don't think people are waking up every day, especially in Alaska, saying, I wanna, be out in a public park, engaging in drug activity in front of the public when it's freezing cold outside. I just don't believe that. And I think what the problem that we have right now is that we have accountability in a shelter system to a certain extent, but when we don't have that accountability outside of the shelter system, you see people running to the openness. And so, Jared and I have had this conversation. Last year, we dropped 930 municipal prosecutable. We dropped 930 cases within the municipality, and we have basically told the public, crime is legal. You can do whatever you want. And Sherry makes a good point. When you call APD, it takes an hour for someone to get there. A lot can happen in an hour, especially with people who are under the influence of drugs or alcohol. And so, not to say APD is not doing the best that they can, they absolutely are. I will support that until my dying day. But we have really mismanaged the way that we engage with homeless individuals, and I think until there's accountability on both ends, and we start saying, like, we're back to law and order and accountability, you cannot languish in our public parks just because it's your choice, we're not gonna move the needle at all. There has to be some sort of system, and we have that system for people who are under the influence of alcohol. We have something, ASP, our Safety Patrol Center, does something called a Title 47, where it's, you are a danger to yourself, you are a danger to the public. It's not a detainment of law where we say you're under arrest, but we do get to take you in, sober you up, and then release you back into the streets. Why are we not doing that with people who are not mentally well, who are under the influence of drugs? We just don't have that system. I'll tell another story. Winter last year, unfortunately, we had a 19-inch snowfall. It was freezing cold outside, and we had a guy in a wheelchair. One of our clients, one of our favorite clients, many years over and over, we said, you gotta get in the van, we have to take you to Warman. He said, I'm not going, I'll get there eventually. I'm like, it is dumping snow, please get in this car. Like, I'm begging you to get into this car. He would not do it, and it was his choice. Well, he ultimately lost his life that night to hypothermia, froze to death outside. And at what point do you say, that's my responsibility, to not say, okay, you've made that choice as an adult. No, you're getting in this vehicle. We are going to change your life and save your life. And I think we've kind of halted that narrative where it's, these are adults, they get to make their decisions. To some extent, we have to say, you're a danger to yourself, please get inside, I need to save you.
Thank you. And that's the first question that everyone has agreed on entirely. Everyone spoke about accountability, and that sounds like that's definitely a theme and something that's got consensus, at least with the panel. Ms. Lori, we'll start with you again here. You've mentioned, you've taken the opportunity to mention the notion of a central facility that had two key ingredients. You use the word big. And it had these two ingredients. And one is it has everything a person would need to exit homelessness. And also, in your second response, you talked about how it has a tiered system that encourages accountability and has means of keeping people safe if they don't want to follow that path. And please correct me if I'm mischaracterizing it.
No, that's true.
But it sounded kind of familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious, is there a facility size that would be too big for Anchorage? And if so, what is it? Is there a place that we shouldn't put it in Anchorage? And if so, where? What are the reasons not to do that? The idea that I thought sounded really good.
Yeah. I don't think there is a reason not to do it. When I look at $190 million spent in 4 years, I can't see a reason not to do it. The size, I think probably maximum 800. And you can, and it'd be varying levels. Like we right now have an apartment complex that when we have students come into the culinary program, and when they stay sober long enough and they're consistent going to school, we put them over there so that they have accountability still. They're learning how to live on their own. They have roommates. Once they graduate, they get 2 months to make sure they're stabilized in a job, and then they start paying a very low rent, but it teaches them to begin to think about their money. And I let them pay, $400 from their first paycheck, $400 for their second, and they have roommates, so it's $400 each. But it helps them learn that they have to budget. And then we have an employment specialist that helps them budget. So that kind of got on the rabbit trail. But the facility that you guys were doing, that was the answer. It was a brilliant answer. And I was so excited to see the possibility of that here in Anchorage, because it centralizes things, and then the rest of the city can still grow and be everything it was meant to be. Right now, we are all stifled by this. Every person here, wherever you go, you see it, and you get hard. You see these guys on the corner, you get hard-hearted because you don't know what to do about it. Handing them $1 is not going to do a thing. Handing them a card to go to some shelter is not going to do a thing, because it's just so ingrained in our system here. So if you have a culture that they come into, and the people working in that culture guide them through it with compassion and love, and they become part of this, and it has to be big enough that they can be outside and they can be inside. So I honestly think that the old Native Hospital property is an ideal spot for it. I think down there, that whole area that's fenced in, I think it's an ideal spot for something like that. Like I said, Northway Mall, I thought was fabulous for it. But I do think it's the answer, and I've seen it work in other communities. I know the leaders of these, they built them. And I just throw this in here. I was just back at HUD this last week and talking to lots of the leaders that are on here, but they are changing housing first. They know it's not working. Ben Carson, when he was in there, was trying to get rid of housing first, but I talked to him in 2018, but it was so close to the end of the term that he couldn't implement it. The people that were with him have started, it's the same team, and they know where they're at, and they have a plan, and so I spent a lot of time talking to them about it. They're freeing up money that's not just going to the state government or going to the cities. They're going to start giving it. They're opening up for faith-based organizations again, because in the past, before 2013, that's who took care of the people, and they did it well. But when it became where contracts were given to take care of people, it all became about money. The city's got more money, and the whole thing is a money business now. It is not a humanity taking care of people business.
Mr. McCormick, you work in healthcare. You've probably been in big hospitals, small hospitals. Some people say healthcare and homelessness have a little bit of overlap. What do you think about women's sports?
Yeah, so I don't know the answer to your question. I don't know what size shelter is too big. I don't know what size is too small. But what I do know is how to get in touch with the experts, and that's people like Sherry Laurie here, Sherry Laurie at the Hope Center, Pastor John at the Rescue Mission. They've been the ones, and these institutions have been the ones that have been taking care of the homeless in our community since 80s, 90s, all the way up until now. As Sherry said, the city has spent $190 million since COVID. Pre-COVID, they spent $0 addressing homelessness, and it was these organizations that entirely bore the burden of homelessness for our community with zero taxpayer dollars. And they did an extraordinary job. And what I've seen from the assembly recently is making it harder on them. Zoning issues, licensing, permitting, reaching back and biting the hand that's really been taking care of us for decades. And what we need to do is be supporting them and their model that's been very effective in our communities.
Mr. Griffin.
Yeah, look, I think part of the problem here is that politicians have talked a lot. And so I'm not going to talk too long on this, but
You got 60 seconds.
all right, there we go. No, give me the hook, guys. No, but I mean, Keith is exactly right. We need to, as politicians, as policy people, we need to go to the people who are the experts, who are on the ground, who are seeing this day in and day out, and be able to have those conversations and get you guys what you guys need to be able to get the job done. Yeah, ideally, look at, I don't know about the exact size. She says 800, works for me. Probably wanted somewhere close to some medical resources. I don't know if you have any ideas of anywhere in town where.
I know a guy.
You know a guy, all right, so yeah. But yeah, we need to listen to the experts. We need to listen to people on the ground, and politicians need to not talk so dang much about it.
And then Ms. Johnson.
Yeah, you know, to speak to Sherry's point, we, I think, missed a good opportunity to test the theory of a large shelter that took in and really enveloped all social services under one roof. You know, I don't think size necessarily is the issue, it's the level of care that we give. If you have 100 bad case managers, you can't beat out a team of 10 incredible case managers. So it's not the size. If I had to speak specifically to fiscal resources, when you have an economies to scale in a facility that is 500 people or 800 people, you saw it, you know, with the facility where he says it's $20 a day, less than $21 a day to serve people. That's 100% true when you have one lease and one care provider and one set of utilities that you have to care for in one building. I think that's really a benefit, at least to our city, when we're talking about a sales tax, we're talking about alcohol tax. We have such limited resources here financially that we really have to do things different. I mean, we're Alaskans, we do things different than the lower 48. So as far as size goes, I think that is not a factor for us. I think we really need to figure out how to manage people well and hold them accountable. One thing that we get to do this year, and we did in prior years, is really have an elevator of services. And what it says is, if you're ready to make the step and change in your life, you get to move on to the next better facility, which would essentially be non-congregate. In prior years, we've prioritized certain people, you know, that are really high on the vulnerability scale, that don't do well in certain situations, and we expend a lot of financial resources, a lot of staff, a lot of compassion fatigue of our employees working on someone who's not ready to make that change. And so when you start to see the elevator of services and prioritize people who are actively engaging in their own rescue, it's less resource expended. These people are really engaging in getting out of homelessness on their own accord, rather than us focusing on a core group of people that just merely don't care to leave homelessness.
Thank you. We're conscious of the time here. There's plenty more for us to talk about. And we've got one more panel question, and I want to leave time for any questions you all might have. I didn't mention it earlier, but we have some fantastic no address swag. And any audience, whichever audience member has the best question for the panel can take this remarkably charming, hard to find no address hat home. So the last question that I've got for the panel, recently the Supreme Court changed the law in America. In the ruling about grants passed, so that you no longer have to have a bed for every person who is experiencing homelessness in the community. I haven't heard anybody say anything that might make that even relevant, but it seems that we now have a free hand as a city to experiment and do as we want to do. It sounds as each of you have pretty compassionate ideas about it. Mr. Gerker, you know, what would you like to see us do next, in light of the fact that we now have this freedom legally to do whatever we want to try to do?
Yeah, you know, I kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, but we have to balance compassion and public safety. So we have to look at what's going on out in the parks, out in the woods, around these urban areas, and we need to start clearing them out. And getting people placed where we can. But that's really, I mean, and that's where the whole chicken and egg, I guess, thing comes into where we're going to put them, we're going to do all that stuff. It has to be a compassionate approach. It has to be common sense. We need to expand, emergency shelters and transitional housing where we can with treatment options. We have to enforce public space regulations while offering some real alternatives, right? I mean, we can't just say, you can't be here, they have to be able to go somewhere. And so we have to be able to do that. And like everybody said here on the panel throughout this discussion, is I think this needs to be a large facility. I think this needs to be a large, comprehensive, takes, one-stop shop, gets you hooked up with everything that you need. But in the meantime, we do need to start taking control of our public spaces back. And we need to project a little bit of stability to the public to say that, hey, it's okay, it's safe now. You can go to the parks, it's gonna be okay. You're not gonna get stuck with a needle going down the slides, right? And so it's gotta be balanced, but it's gotta be comprehensive. And I think that the public's been very patient for a very long time on this issue, and I think it's time that we start showing them that we're taking this seriously.
Thank you. So, and to clarify then, it sounds like you're in favor of comprehensive abatement of camps and, in reducing visible homelessness, but with the caveat that we have to have a place for each person to go. So would you be willing to use municipal funds to provide enough places for folks to go? What does that look like?
As a stopgap, if that's what we have to do, then yeah. If that's the answer for a little bit of time until we can get everything else set up how we need to. Like everything that we're talking about up here isn't going to happen overnight. It's going to take time to do. And as we've said, government sucks. Government is slow. And so it's going to take time to do that. And so the municipality has a role in this to help bridge the gap. So yes, we need to get the abatement going, but we also need to understand that as a city, we do have an obligation here as well beyond just just the public safety element of it.
Thank you, Ms. Lori.
I have a little different take on this. We get the people that are kicked out of their campsites. Right now, they are abating Davis Park. Davis Park, they've been there for many years, a lot of them. And we take a food truck over there every day. We have a relationship with them. We're feeding them. They are abating them now. They're starting to. We don't know where we're going to find them. People that we have relationships with that we are getting to come to Hope Center to get into our program, to get job skill training. Several have come in the last year. So just randomly, and we've seen it time and time again. Now, when Mayor Bronson was mayor, I know nobody liked it when they were at Centennial, but it was controlled and all the services went there. And that's where a lot of others like Salvation Army did an amazing job with that. Alexis did an amazing job. People went in there and brought clothes there, brought towels there, brought all the things that we, Beans had a food truck there. We all did something together in one spot. And it was controlled. Yes, there was stuff that happened, but it's nothing like the stuff that happens now. And he said it, that guy that didn't have his license. Every time they move their campsite in abatement, they don't think ahead to get their stuff and go move somewhere. They wait until the last minute, and then the bulldozer comes, everything's thrown in a bin. They lose everything again. They lose birth certificates, and they have to start the whole process all over again of getting their identification, getting their food stamps, whatever they have to help them survive. Family pictures. I mean, all these things are just swept up in when they abate the camps. So I agree they need to be out of public spaces, but provide a place that they can go. And Centennial was it worked. But at that point, I don't think the city, it got so much worse that now looking back, that wasn't so bad. So I just feel like it needs to be much more thought out than just, okay, you got 10 days, you're out of here. Because I've been doing this since 2005. Back then volunteering, and I've seen person after person after person abated and getting worse and worse and worse, and some of them are still around in 2005, still trying to get their IDs, still trying to, and they've lost everything. They've lost everything, and those pictures of their family mean a lot to them, and it's just gone. So I think it needs to be very well thought out before we make it.
Yeah, I think legally we were hobbled before Grant passed with Johnson. We were spinning our wheels, and now since the decision, it's given us more options, but I still have seen us not using our resources very wisely. As we talked about up here with law enforcement, The current administration is still doing the 3-touch, 72-hour, and then abate, and I think that that is a waste of our resources. We're talking about police not being able to respond for an hour to crisis situations. I did a ride-along with the mobile intervention team with APD, and saw kind of firsthand what they were dealing with. We went through Davis Park. It's not a wise use of our resources. Another unwise use of our resources in terms of abatement is bulldozing city blocks of our beautiful community. Looking at Tudor and the highway, looking at Tudor or the highway and 36th. We need to abate. We need to make our public spaces safe. We need to do it wisely, and that is not destroying our beautiful green areas in the city of Flowers.
And Ms. Johnson, the final word on panel questions.
Yeah, abatement is such a unique topic because, in my opinion, abatement is necessary, but only if the action that follows it really provides an answer to the problem that we have. You know, if you go to Mountain View Community Council, they feel as if we have abated this entire city into Davis Park, which is probably true at this point. We have people that are being abated with 72 hours notice anywhere in Anchorage, and they end up in Davis because they know that Davis is going to be a protected park where they can still be. Well, what happens is you get 300 people who have spiraling mental health, drug addiction, substance misuse problems, all in one area. You have shootings, you have gun violence, you have kids in that park trying to play, you know, intermingling with people who have deep substance misuse problems. And so abatement doesn't work in the sense of let's just abate everywhere into one facility. My method that I believe in, that I'm a firm believer in, is small abatements into shelter with those services to get people out. One of the things I would love to see is if we abated a 50-person park and said, you cannot go camp anywhere else. If you are camping somewhere else and we catch you camping somewhere else within the next 7 days, it's gonna be, you know, not a great experience. We need you into shelter so that we can help you get out of addiction, find purpose. I'm telling you, the answer to homelessness or to solving homelessness is giving people purpose. I swear by it, whatever that purpose is, whether it's art, whether it's community, whether it's being a helping hand, education, really giving someone value and letting them know that they are valued is the answer to solving this problem. Because when you meet people who are out in these camps, they have no desire to get out because they are overlooked, they are not loved, they have nobody. I mean, when you see someone on the corner, you're diverting your eyes because you don't want to, you know, engage with them. And I think that engagement component is really what's broken in the system, is that our community has compassion fatigue. We are so exhausted of homelessness. I hear it all the time. But until we start engaging and saying, we are not going to let you languish in this park, there is no other answer aside from, I'm going to value you, I'm going to show you your worth, and I'm going to make you feel valued. We are not going to change homelessness in this town.
Thank you. Do we have?
Yeah, you want to do Q&A with the, our questions from the audience? Please. Yeah. So, if you can, I'm going to share my mic. Off here. And we will welcome questions. Yes, let me bring the mic to you, sir. Make it quick, concise. Yeah.
Actually, I do have two questions at this point. The first is about a recent bill that was introduced into our state legislature about a homeless bill of rights. Have you read that? And would it in any way exacerbate the existing situation?
Yes, so the person that is behind the Homeless Bill of Rights is a man named TJ Beers, and if you have been involved in any municipal committees, TJ Beers is a very eccentric person who wants to live outside. And I think that homeless people should have the exact same rights that we have, but there still needs to be accountability. We have something that I'll just call it poverty defense, where we say, oh, you can get away with that because you're living outside. Until our society makes a change to say everybody has the same rights, everybody has the same rights to public safety, to being safe in our parks and trails, we will not have a system or a society that is, you know, worth living in. And so, yes, I have read the Homeless Bill of Rights. I would say that homeless people have the exact same rights as we do, but they also have the same laws and accountability that we do as well.
Next question from this side.
Did any other panelists want to respond to that? Or? Does anyone else want to respond to that?
Go all the way up the stairs. Okay, fine. Here you go, man.
Hi, Sherry. Sherry is awesome. Sherry gave me the opportunity to put my degree from UAF in 2003. I'm gonna be 60 years old. About 2 years ago at the downtown soup kitchen. And I used to be homeless. I used to be at the Brother Francis shelter. I've been to API until they kicked me out and they wouldn't let me in there anymore. I went to several treatment centers. I have 52 convictions. I know about homelessness. I'm now an independent case manager. I'm boots on the ground. This is my best friend, Rita Peter. She is now a primary counselor at Aquila House. And she was also homeless. Her and I actually rarely wore glasses. Sometimes I didn't wear shoes. Our home was actually the CSP. We used to call it our personal limo. So I just want to say, we had a hard time finding this place. As Alaska Native people, we're trying to look at what we can do to hold our own corporations responsible in helping our own people on these streets. So the more education that we can get, because God's dealing with me with anger because I can't speak to them until I get healed from all that. But that's what we're looking at doing, is because we have cultural, what I see with homelessness is our people come in for medical from the village, which is totally different than city living. They don't know how to navigate the city. They have a problem with alcohol. They go to the hospital to get help. Even their escort, they get drunk, they miss their flight, they learn how to be homeless, they learn where to find the food. It becomes a way of life. They never make it back to the village. So that's what I'm looking at, along with some other people. How can we help with this so that maybe they get released to people like us that can help them navigate the city, even get them to their appointments, get them shopping, get them back on the plane, back to their village. That's just one thing. But I just wanted to say thank you for all of you for being here. It was important that we show up on behalf of our people, and what can we do to help them.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Very encouraging. One more question? Anyone? Mr. Craig?
Well, I want to thank AMAC for putting on this panel. It is, to me, the most important and significant of all panels having to do with our municipal assembly elections. This subject right here is not being treated anywhere else in the depth that it needs. Question on clarity. Several times it was referred to that we missed opportunities to set up the very navigation facility, the large facility that is the subject here of the solution. And just for clarity, what are you referring to? Are you referring to the missed opportunity to repurpose the Northway Mall? Or secondly, what happened, the disaster that our current assembly and mayor did with Mayor Bronson and I think our moderator's proposal for the navigation center? What are you referring to?
I think it's both of them. Mayor Bronson was involved with both of them. He and I were talking, Alexis knew about it. It was just on the starting, it's right on the starting gate, but then the roof fell in and out on the way. But the navigation center, the first time the city has looked at a large facility, Dr. John was very much part of that. He had a very good plan. It was a good idea and it got squashed by the assembly, very, very unjustly. And now it's over at the court and
Right. Right. Let's just.
So wrong with that, and I'm sure Alexis knows a lot more about that, but it was a good idea. It was an excellent idea. And he actually felt that both facilities would be adequate because then you could have 400 in another. So there was a lot of talk back then because he was really searching for solutions. Right now, they're not really looking for solutions. So.
Yeah, I mean, when I say missed opportunity, I think there is hundreds of missed opportunities that we have when we talk about the money that was expended over the last 5 years, 190 million. That's a hard number to fathom, quite frankly. So I think when you look back in your rearview mirror and say, what could we have done differently? I think there's a lot of opportunity for things to have done differently. The navigation center was not without missteps, and I take full accountability for that as well. But I think we really are trotting down a path of, just a one-size-fits-all solution, and that's just, direct service providers will tell you that will never work in this town. And so really focusing on how to heal the person, 190 million, just keep going back to it. It's just an incredible amount of money, and I think when you really start to hone in and use that funding intentionally, we can solve a problem in better ways.
Please,
Just
Mr.
wanted
Brooker,
to-
Mr. McCormick, I imagine you guys are running for assembly for a reason. We're talking about, we seem to be throwing the assembly under the bus. Do you guys have any comments about what you might want to do different on the assembly?
I hope to take Randy Solt's seat, co-chairing the Committee of Housing and Homelessness, and look to, Alexis said, spending that money more intentionally and looking for long-term solutions, not the short-term emergency turnover and do it again next year type of spending.
Yeah, I would just say the exact same thing. That's what we're doing now. I think actually I had coffee with Garo yesterday, and the expression she uses, it's a hamster wheel, and we've got to stop it. So.
You guys are standing there so politely, I just wanted to make sure you had a chance to say something.
Question here. Wow, we got a lot of questions. So how about Karen? Go ahead.
Okay, I've heard you use the word community a lot, that the community should be responsible, the community should do this and that. And I would remind you that there's no such thing as a community as far as the assembly is concerned. It's government money, and that $190 million came out of our pockets, and we didn't get what we paid for. So my question is, under what clause of the Constitution is the government, be it city or state, authorized to take money from the housed, which is another name for taxpayers, and give it to the homeless? And don't give me the hooey about public safety, because when you toss out somebody who's endangering your staff inside because he's a danger to the public, to the safety of your staff, and throwing them out, you're throwing them to endanger all of us out here and our children and how we navigate the parking lots.
So what we're talking about is a little bit of risk mitigation as well. Before I started in psychiatry, I worked in orthopedics, in Alaska Fraction Orthopedic. I participated in dozens of surgeries in amputations, necrotizing fasciitis. The costs we expend if we do nothing for homelessness and we donate nothing to help our neighbors experiencing homelessness, we pay in other ways through functions of our government.
Taxes are not donations.
No, I mean donations to charitable organizations that do this. So whether through taxes, if you do not pay any taxes, if you do not donate to the cause, we pay in other ways that are already set up and institutionalized through our government, through things like Medicaid, and having people come into the ER, rotating through and through in the ER until they finally get an infection that's so great that we have to amputate their leg, and then they stay in the hospital for months at a time. That's also not a good use of our funds either. So using taxpayer dollars to enact long-term solutions that provide real results is risk mitigation and good use of our tax dollars.
What part of the Constitution?
So can I just address that I'm not a politician, I think so. Prior to 2013 and Housing First, donations took care of homelessness. Catholic Social Services, Downtown Soup Kitchen at the time, several different institutions. Generally the church would take care of people, charity would take care of people. Then it became a business. Housing First made homelessness a business, that a lot of money went out. And they used the figure of $20 a night. That's $19 a night for us. I don't know what it is in a hotel room. I know it's over 100. It's expensive in a hotel room. But it can be done, and when you have charitable people that are called to the work, caring for the people, you get better results than a government-run business.
So 4 more questions. Craig
Okay.
and Mr. Dana.
It's obvious that the assembly has not been able to fulfill their commitment to this issue, so I would think it's time to just not work with them. They're not working it out, so let's go back to the faith-based organizations. Let's go back to the people. Talk about the assembly still getting involved in this is a waste of time. Secondly, centralized idea about one facility. Anchorage is a pretty big spread out city, and these camps, another name for them would be communities. So jamming all these communities into one facility is kind of like maybe a bad idea. That's all, thank you.
So can I just address that? We don't take any money from the city. They won't give us any money. In fact, they just took money from us because of taxes for our apartment complex that, anyways, this is a big long story. But, so I just had dole out $50,000 that was not taxpayer money, that was donor money to pay for something that we should never have had to pay for. So we exist solely on donations. As far as in a big facility, the way they are set up is with the stop gates. You know, they have a wristband. You know, they have the check-in for the classes, that same type of thing, where if you are at this level of behavior, you have this access. If you're going to classes, you have access to this area. If you're in treatment, you have access. So you begin to separate those that are willing to move forward. You take the ones that are going to be going to job training and put them more in a dorm situation rather than in congregate shelter. So it has to be, that's why Northwood is such a great idea. But Colorado Springs is very comparable in size to us. And they have an amazing facility there. They start just with the basics and they work their way through till there's actually family housing and there's all the transitional housing, and then they move them on out. So there are ways to do it that it's not, we in Anchorage know one big room with lots of people in it. And that's not what these facilities are like. They really do take care of the people. And then dental care comes in, health care comes in. People come in to serve the people at that facility rather than a bus system that takes them all over and we're giving them bus passes and they get lost and they get drunk and they don't come back. You know, so it solves a whole lot of problems.
Yeah, you get no complaints from me about getting city government out of solving homelessness. Like I said, they're the experts. They've been doing it for decades, long before the city spent a single dollar trying to solve the issue. So me getting on the assembly is going to be offering up what these organizations need and how we can support them continuing their mission.
Testing.
Stand
Yeah, it's on.
into the next assembly meeting, all of us.
I do not have a question, but as a Christian, I looked up in the Bible, and the Lord tells us to deal with the poor. It's mentioned, the word poor, 197 times in the Bible. I'm part of a prayer group at my church. And every Sunday evening, we get together and we pray about everything you can think of. So, what I would suggest, when you get into your positions, I'm going to say when, that's talking faith, surround yourself with MVPs, most valuable prayers. Get a small group to pray about the situation, pray about things that you're going to decide about. Because when we incorporate God, He can give us the ideas. He gives us the solutions. We just don't remember to ask. So ask, and it shall be done for you by my Father who is in heaven. That's what we pray.
Well, I really do approve all of the things, wonderful things you're doing, but my question is about those that don't want to have shelter. They don't want to be loved. They don't want to be separated from their access to drugs. And that's their God right now. So what do we do about them? They're happy in their homeless state because they have access to their drug dealers and are part of a network of drug use. So that's my question.
Yeah, I'll go back to what I said. I fully believe in everyone's liberty and rights. and their right to not participate in society is their choice, but they cannot live off the society that they do not want to participate in, and that means not living in our parks and public spaces. I know it's hard to imagine and think of, but making that choice is a difficult one.
So where do you put them? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, I didn't say it was going to be easy for them to make that decision, but that's their decision to make.
And some of those are hardened criminals that are hiding. And those are the most difficult to work with. I mean, what do you do with them? They're hiding. They don't want anybody coming in. And they're dangerous even to the homeless. You know, over at Davis Park, there is a hierarchy there of people that actually, there's a gang there that charges for people to camp there. So there are some issues that really prayer, God, and people doing His will. He knows the solutions. And so that's where I go.
Yeah, I was just saying, look, kind of what I said earlier as well, and kind of echo what Keith had said, is that if you don't want to participate in society, if you don't want to participate in you know, how everybody else is doing it, right? You're free to do that. But that ends when your actions are infringing upon somebody else's rights, somebody else's right to be safe out in a public space, somebody else's right to not have their house burned down in a fire or something like that. So when there's acts of lawlessness, there has to be accountability. There has to be a strong response for a public safety standpoint, because we have an obligation to protect the community, the whole community.
I did hear this week there was 49 drug dealers arrested at Davis Park. That's a big deal.
Yeah, and lastly, what I'll say is, I think right now we have this narrative that in order for us to show compassion, we have to validate people's experiences. And I think that really goes back to Jared's point is, at some point we have to start saying, because we love you, because we're compassionate, you cannot continue to live in this lifestyle, especially when it has a negative impact to your fellow neighbors. The biggest thing that we talk about now is summer fire. I mean, we have experience in 2022, we had the Elmore Dowling fire that took out 13 acres. It was caused by 4 homeless individuals. And had we not had immediate help from the state, we would have seen a fire take on scenic foothills. And that is such a scary situation because now you're creating more homeless people. You're putting people, displacing them and putting them in danger. And I really think that rather than, you know, focusing on the drug dealers and the criminals and allowing people to live in this lifestyle, we really need to start focusing on the people that are going to be impacted if a wildfire takes place in this town, because we will be in a world of hurt.
What are we gonna do with all the homeless people gone in? That's a big one.
One last question, 2 comments.
I guess my question is do we have, and as the gentleman was talking earlier, do we have another avenue besides the assembly, or can we override the assembly? And did you already go to court with that? Did that already happen? Let me finish what I'm saying here too. I've seen us do for the last 5 years go out and lease hotels and rooms to the tune of $5 to $10 to $20 million in one winter. And it's made me sick to see that all they did was run those people in the hotel and run them back out when the snow was gone. Or even before the snow was gone, as soon as it raised up, it's, higher than 40 degrees outside. So I know that's my issue. And there's one other thing I'd like to be concerned about. And I'm so happy that the Native people were here to share with us their hopes, because there's 50% of the homeless people that are Native, and they are very difficult to deal with. Not that they're not good people, they are, but they have difficulty handling liquor, which makes them go berserk, and they lose it much easier than we do. So I'm happy that they're interested in getting the Native, what do you call them, corporations to help out with the problems. And I-
That's it.
Okay, I'm gonna address your first point. If you take any sound clip from this, take this one. I do not recommend overthrowing the government at any point. We live in a constitutional republic, and I believe that voting matters, and every person, every vote. So if you take any soundbite, take that from me. What I would say is, if you don't like the society that you're currently living in, door knock, vote, make your changes known. But please do not try and overthrow the government.
No, our answer is voting.
Yes.
If there was another avenue to be able to handle it, that was legal and that we did something with.
Absolutely. So what I would say is get out and vote, use your voices, advocate, show up. We need people to show up, not just sit on Facebook and complain about the problems that we have here. Really get into direct services. I have volunteer opportunities. If people want to experience homelessness firsthand, I swear to you the narrative will change if you actually go to homeless shelters and do the work. So secondly, what I would say is, I know that it's frustrating. I get it. I work in it. I've been on both sides of it. When I was homeless coordinator for the municipality, thousands of emails coming in, flooding in, saying, I don't like this system. We have a balanced system where we have an assembly that's voted in. We also have a strong mayor position. And then lastly, we have, our laws. Until those things are balanced on the law end of things, you're really gonna see a system that is disoriented. And so I think with the community, the faith-based group, there is a role for government, unfortunately. And really the direct service providers, that's where you start to see an impact and make a change in your community.
Thanks for giving us a good word.
Yes.
One more, and then.
Provinces elect with 18% or less of the people who can vote.
Okay, go ahead.
So I just wanted to say that I grew up in and out of foster homes, and then I started having children, and I was in and out of foster homes with the children because I was young. And then I finally somehow I found out how to get housing. And when I got housing, I was able to start my life without going from somebody else's house to somebody else's house to this man, to this man, to this man. Housing was the beginning point for me. Did I know how to take care of that house? No, nothing about how to take care of that house. But I was able to start there, and I was really thankful to have it. But what you're talking about is surrounding with those other programs to support when you actually do get housing, I think is a wonderful thing. I did not have that. And I'll just say today that after growing up in foster homes and being in retarded class and doing all these things, that fortunately, because I got housing and I had a base to start from, I get to help other people now and counsel them. So.
I'll add on to that. I think the key factor in that is that you wanted to make that change and you are ready to make that change. And when that housing is provided to you and you have that mentality of, I'm not going back to the streets, I will not be couch surfing, that's really where the impact happens. And I spoke to it earlier, Housing First is not without success. There are success stories in it, but there's also a lot of failures. And so we really need to figure out how to prioritize the people that are absolutely willing to make a change, such as yourself. And look at you now. I mean, there are success stories in homelessness. The media will never tell you that. They won't pick up any story where people are housed and doing great. They only like to engage in the misery. So. One more.
Hi, my name is Rochelle Alger. When I get an opportunity to clarify something, I like to take that opportunity. I was the purchasing director for the municipality of Anchorage under Mayor Bronson. And the navigation center was very thoughtfully done, and it was done in accordance with code. Dr. Morris put a lot of research into it. So did Alexis, so did other people. The navigation center was squashed because there was a new individual at the municipality that made a mistake. And he and his supervisor stood before the assembly, took ownership of that mistake, apologized to the citizens of Anchorage, and asked how they could correct the situation. And instead what happened is a number of assembly members decided to crucify Mayor Bronson for that, myself and others. They lied, current assembly members lied, present candidates running lied, and what I can assure you is during my time at the municipality, not one single person, not an assembly member, not an executive, not even the ones I dislike that I wish I could say did something nefarious. No one ever asked me to do anything illegal. No one ever asked me to lie. And no one ever did anything nefarious under my watch. So it truly was a political stunt, and it's at the cost of all of our lives, all of our tax dollars, and most importantly, the people that are homeless. So I encourage you to really pay attention. The information that I'm talking to you about is readily available with public records searches, asking people, it's there. Don't just trust the media, don't just trust candidates, don't just trust assembly members. Trust but verify. Thank you.
Thank you all for that. Thank you all for coming. We have time for one more. Let's close the panel here. Thank you. And thank you for it's good to end on that question because it highlights what we started with, which is, there's a price to be paid when you choose a life of community and government service. So thank you again to our panelists for making that choice, making that sacrifice. Thank you for doing it. I know each of you want to make the city better. Thanks for taking time out of your
All right. I have the closing remarks on the microphone. Thank you. I have 5 questions here. These are the takeaways. First one, are you a more informed voter today? Are you a more informed voter today? Are you? Okay. Number 2, can we do better? All right, number 3, what is one idea that is new to you? Talk about it on the way home. What is one new idea that is new to me? Number 4, what can I do? Who can I vote for on April 1st? Okay, what is your vote about? Okay, number 5, the last one is the takeaway, change the decision makers at the voting level. Leave here today and change the decision makers. Look where it's been so far. Thank you. Now our next meeting is in April. It's the 3rd Thursday. It's at the Wellspring facility. If you don't know where that is, find out at the table out there or talk to me. And the topic is FBI and the scams that are going on out there right now, of which I saw one the last 3 days. It's amazing. Okay, that's coming up April 17th. Thank you for coming. Good night.